Hello everyone, in this video we will be setting up our project for mobile to use with Game Creator. We'll also be using the mobile components module as it adds a ton of features that are really useful. So let's get started. So first off, we have to make sure that your install of Unity supports Android or iOS or both. So what we're going to do is make sure you go to installs, and then where you see your Unity version you want to use, click on the three dots, click on Add Modules, and then make sure either one of these is installed or both. I think it doesn't hurt to install both by default, because I'm pretty sure that if you're building and at some point you'll decide to want to launch on both of these platforms anyway. So that's what I have installed. Then next up, we're gonna open up our project. So once we're inside of our project, we need to convert our project to be set up for Android. And I'm going to pick Android here as I'm using a Windows machine, so selecting iOS is a bit troublesome on Windows. So let's go to build settings. So here we are inside of our project, and I'm going to be using Android as an example. I mean, in general, mobile settings will be pretty similar. It's just building is slightly different. So we're going to select File, Build Settings, and even though we installed iOS and Android as modules, by default, the target platform will still be Windows for our project. So what we need to do is select Android, and then simply press Switch Platform. Now this might take a short while, especially depending on how many assets you have in your project. So if you have a lot of assets with a lot of textures, this is going to take a tiny bit longer than normal. So just wait until this is finished and then we can continue. So once this is done, you will see the little Unity logo being next to Android now, and we have build and build run as options. I'd recommend always just using build and then just trying it out, but obviously you can just use build and run. Now I'm going to go to player settings as well, and we're going to go over a couple of the basics here. So first things first, when you go to your player settings, you will see all of these details, which is pretty similar to what you'd see by default. Now a couple of things will be different. As you can see, we have Windows, iOS, and Android here as options. Starting, especially for newer devices and not even really that new, you have these icon options, so adaptive. And adaptive basically just means it will automatically adapt, so you don't have to fill in all of the other textures. We have a background and foreground, and in general I'd recommend the foreground just to be a color and your foreground to be the icon, and just use the highest possible resolution for the icons, and everything else will be filled in. Hence the name adaptive. For older devices, you can also fill in all of these icons separately if you want to support those as well. Then next up we have resolution and presentation. So starting full screen mode, I've never seen a game that doesn't do that, so I'm pretty sure we should just turn that on by default. We have resolution scaling mode, so disabled or fixed DPI. Could be useful if you want to support multiple resolutions or types. Then we have aspect ratio, which is pretty standard. But the most important part here is default orientation. And unless your game really supports both portrait and landscape modes, I'd make sure you select one of these two, because most likely you will only support one. If you support both, great, then you can leave it on auto rotation. So I don't. You know, in the game I'm creating only has landscape, like most of the games I've played. So once that's set up, you have splash screen options. So by default, you will have a Unity splash screen as well, unless you're paying for Unity, and then you won't have those. But you can also add your own splash screen in the mix, but you'll always see the Unity one unless you pay for Unity. And then there's a couple of other settings, color spaces, and a bunch of other things. I definitely, recommend having a look at this once you're a bit further along. Now, one thing I do want to highlight is that lighting will automatically already be adjusted. You can turn those settings back up if you want to for a specific reason. But that's all up to you. You can play around with those. And obviously here we have all of the key store settings. This is for when you actually publish to the Google Play Store. So that's a lot of settings I'd recommend diving in and having a look at. Let's head over to the actual game scene itself. Now in the editor, a lot of this will be similar. As you can see, shadows have become a slightly lower resolution, and with slightly I mean quite a bit. Now you can up these settings if you want to, if you're going to target only more capable devices, but it's good that Unity does this by default. So that's pretty cool. Now when it comes to camera angles and lighting settings, there's a couple of tips I can give based on developing for Android or mobile in general myself. If you are going to use the adventure cam, so an actual 3D game, be aware that you'll be quite limited in what you can actually do. In terms of details in the world, in terms of models, polygons, etc. A lot needs to be rendered. Yes, there's tons of assets that will help you optimize rendering, draw distances, etc. But it will still be heavy on your machine, which is why a lot of mobile games don't actually use that. You will often see a slightly more top-down view, like something like this. And you would be surprised by how much you can suddenly have on your screen, how high the quality of your assets can actually be if you are using a top-down camera. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to the camera mode. Again, you don't have to do this, but in terms of performance, it makes a huge difference. So we're going to do a follow. Something like this. And now we have a follow camera. Obviously you can play around with these settings, but with a view like this you can actually do a lot in terms of performance in your game. You can have tons of props, details, etc. Obviously always be mindful of the polygon counts and texture resolution. Now that is a really important thing as well. I'd recommend not going higher than 1024 by 1024 for the player, and everything else 512 by 512 in terms of texture resolutions. These have a huge impact on mobile. Obviously you can play around with this and make it higher if you want, but if you want some performance gains, I definitely recommend lowering the overall texture resolution. So that's the basics for the camera. When it comes to lighting, Unity itself will recommend watching out with real-time lighting in general. So when we have our directional light and we have a look, by default it was set to mix for me, but you have real-time and baked. Now if you do not have any time of day in your game and the time of day is always the same, I'd recommend baking pretty much everything and only leaving real-time shadows, for example, for the player and other enemies that run around, and baking all of the other shadows. This will be a good performance boost as well. So, quick tip, if you do have real-time shadows because of time of day, yes, this can still be done. However, if you are going for a typical adventure camera look, so normal third person, this will be quite impactful and heavy. With a camera angle like this, it is definitely possible, but again, it costs more performance. Cool, so let's set up some of the basics now. So I'm going to go to preferences, and in general here we have a couple of options. Now, because I have mobile components installed, I'm going to drag in a new prefab. There we go. Or the dynamic one. There we go. I'm going to turn on force display in editor because I want to see the stick. And in Touchstick mode, we have two options, continuous and discrete. Now, when you look at the state of animations between idle, walking, and running, there are numbers in between, if you will. So you can have like a half walk in terms of animations. You can have a half run in terms of animations. Now that might not look as good, so we have the option of discrete as well, which will basically just toggle between those modes, which is more precise in a way in terms of animations, less precise in terms of speed, but in the end it will most likely be a better option. So I'm going to turn it on right now. So here we have our scene, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a empty here, and we're going to call this trigger on start, because it literally describes what we're doing here. And I'm going to go to mobile components here, Touchstick, and we're going to do setup Touchstick. We can position this to where it goes, and we have this option here as well, Touchstick resized. So once I press on this, you can have a value here. Now the coolest thing is that you can set a global variable. So let's add one. And this will be a number. So by default, I'll set this to 0.1. And basically what you can do is you can have resize touchstick options in your mobile settings, for example. So you can give the user control of how big the touchstick should be. I see I misspelled this as well. But anyway, giving control to how big the touchstick should be is quite useful. Some phones will have really big displays, some will have smaller displays, and if you're developing for tablets as well, for example, you'll have really big displays. So being able to resize this is quite useful. So I'm going to hit play right now, just to demonstrate how this works a bit. And as you can see, our touchstick is positioned from the start, and we can run around, and no matter where they press on the left side, they will have control over the player, which is pretty useful, again, if you have different size screens, which will be practically all the time. When you create for mobile, there's so many different display sizes out there. People have different hands as well, so some people will have bigger thumbs, bigger fingers. So having the option to have this dynamic on the left side is incredibly useful. But as you can see, if I press on the right side, nothing will happen. So you can have all of your other buttons on the right side. Now in terms of buttons, I'm going to create a really simple canvas here. And again, you don't have to follow what I'm doing in terms of resolution. This is just for demonstration purposes, because I want to go over what you can do with buttons. Now, first things first, we'll add a default button here. Let's just make them the same size. There we go. Now, I'm not saying this makes any sense, but again, this is just for demonstration purposes. If you want to have, a toggle for running, which you don't often see on mobile games, but if you do want to have that, you will have several options. Now, often on a keyboard, when you press a button, it will toggle a state. So that's something we can do. So once we press, I'm going to make this simple. There we go. I'm going to call some conditions here. Let's drag those in. So if run is turned off, then player can run, and otherwise he can't run. We also need to change that bool. And there we go. So let's give this a try. So right now I can only walk. If I toggle this button, now I can run. If I toggle it again, I can no longer run. Now, what you often see though is that you'll have the option to be able to, if you look on a keyboard, for example, running is often when you hold a button. Same on a console, when you hold a certain button, you'll be able to run. Now, this isn't a touchscreen, so I don't have dual input, so it will be a bit hard to demonstrate how you can use both at the same time. But by default, so let's head back out, a button will not have a hold option. So I can't hold, this button right now, which is annoying, but there's no way to have a hold, and that has nothing to do with Game Creator. That's just how Unity works by default. Now, we can work around this, so we can add a box collider. And the reason I'm doing 160 by 160, by the way, is because that's the image size. I'm going to keep this one, it doesn't need the additional depth. And oh, there we go. I'm going to get rid of this button altogether, as I won't be using it. And let's make sure that's a trigger. Now we have the mouse hold option here, and the reason we can use that is because touch input is basically mouse input. There's no difference. So we can add a hold here. So on timeout, we can do that a bit faster. We can add property can run. And then let's add another trigger. Same one on mouse up. And then we're going to turn off can run. Now I have no idea how I'm going to demonstrate this on the screen while only using the mouse as an input here, but let's try it out just in case. Well, no, can't really demonstrate that really well with a mouse input. That's a shame. So anyway, so once on a mobile, if you're going to try this out, obviously right now it's not functioning as it should because we don't really have that input. But basically what you can add here is that once you hold this button, we can run, and once you let go, it will let go of that action as well, and we can no longer run. Now, I'm not sure if that functions the way it should on mobile, but I'm guessing not. On the desktop, but I'm guessing not. But yeah, anyway, this is a way to actually um, to have hold options in terms of inputs. There's no way to demonstrate this without actually having a touchscreen monitor, which I do not have, so we'll just have to do with this. So yeah, that's one pretty cool thing what you can do in terms of hold input. As you can see, in terms of once I press this, you will see the button change color. If I hold this, nothing happens. Hover is not interesting anyway because you don't have that on a phone. So all you really need to do, and that's what this button does, is it changes the color once you press it. And you can add that to this as well. So in the actions, once you press it, just what is it, graphic, I think, graphic color, and you can just change the graphic color, and that's it. So that way it will function like a normal button, but you can have a hold feature. So yeah, I thought I'd demonstrate that functionality. Anyway, let's get out of our UI right now. Let's head over to the player, and we'll have a look at what mobile components adds to the mix. And as you might have seen here, there's already a couple of different options. So we have different touch sticks for different types of cameras. So if you're going to use a different type of camera, you can use a different type of touch stick. We have options as well in terms of racing games, so touch stick pedals. And I'm not going to set that up as mobile examples already has all of that. So I just want to, let's save. Just want to demonstrate that if you're going to do this. So if you want to make a racing game, there we go. So this will drive and this will steer. So yeah, the complete setup what you need to have for a racing game. Pretty cool if you're going to make a racing game with Game Creator for mobile. Now you will see this in your screen as well, which is your battery. So again, really useful for a menu like a pause menu or a main menu, as that's something you can't see on your phone while you're playing a game full screen. We have gestures as well, and again, I'm not going to go through all of this. This example has set all of these things up perfectly, and I can't demonstrate any of this on a desktop screen anyway, so I'd recommend just building these examples so you can actually try them out. And the way you do that, when you go to build settings, you will have the default Game Creator scenes here. Just get rid of them and add the open scene. So this is gestures. Add it to your build settings. Then when you build, this scene will be playable. And I'd recommend doing that, as demonstrating this on a desktop screen is pointless anyway. So yeah, pretty cool. Same with haptics, so vibration. Really cool. Auto run if you want to have an endless runner, which has swipe options as well. Again, really cool things which are practically impossible to actually demonstrate right now. Now what I do want to show is this new feature which allows you to create twin stick shooters, which is something I like to do. So in this scene we have two touch sticks, and they're both locked to their sizes. Don't mind the size, obviously you can resize to whatever you want. Someone is shooting at us, and I'm going to take some space here, going to hide. And once I actually press this, as you can see, I have full directional twin stick shooter control, which is absolutely awesome. If you've ever played Halo, Spartan Assault, for example, on iOS, that's how this plays. And I'm going to go through these settings a bit because it's really awesome what has been done here. So on start, we're setting up a couple of touch sticks. The revolver is drawn, and we have some bullets as well. This might seem like a lot. It really is not. On twin stick shooter, you're going to go through your bullets really fast. What I would recommend is adjusting the fire rate for these guns, as the default fire rate seems pretty normal when you have to keep clicking a button or a key on your keyboard or a mouse button. However, with a twin stick shooter, you will shoot a lot faster, so I recommend lowering the fire rate just a bit. Otherwise, you'll be going through those magazines really fast. So the interesting thing here, we have two touch sticks, and I'm going to resize. No, let's just keep it as is. Makes it easy to demonstrate. This is similar to the first one I set up in the other scene. Not really that different. You obviously have a single tap action as well. So, jump, for example, could be tied if you just press that stick once. Could be useful. But the most interesting one is the new aiming touchstick. Now, this has a prefab, and just like all other prefabs, you can customize the look if you would want to. Basically, it consists of two different buttons, so the base and the stick itself, so easy to customize if you would like to. We're setting this up the same way as the other one, as you can see, but we're doing this on the right side, which you should do because you can't have them overlapping each other. We have the resize option here, and then we have orbit mode, and we have touch type. Now, as you can see, instead of single tap action, we have while using, single short tap, and single long tap. So while using, we're starting our aim, so a new aim option has been made, and then when we hold this, we shoot, and when we let go, we stop aiming. And that's how we can set up a twin stick shooter setup. And again, I'm not going to go through this because it's literally set up in the examples and it just works perfectly. So recommend having a look, but honestly, this is truly amazing. Now, you do have two different options here, directional and rotational. Directional is exactly like like a default twin stick shooter. Rotational has a slightly different use. So we have use vertical aiming here, and I want to demonstrate that as well, especially if you are making a normal third-person game that might be slightly more interesting. So let's run away again before we get shot. So as you can see, holding this, oh, and we already got shot, so I'm going to hide behind even more blocks here if I have the chance. Otherwise, I'm just going to turn off. Let's turn them off. There we go. So this allows me to turn around. It allows me to shoot down, shoot up, and again turn around. So different type of input, but pretty cool as well, especially if you are using a adventure camera. So yeah, I wanted to show this because it's really cool. Now, in terms of all of the other things that are added, again, I want to highlight how useful they are, but I can't demonstrate any of that on a desktop screen. So, most of these things are just something you'd have to build and try out. So I'd recommend, if you are getting this, add all of these to your build settings, build an APK, and just try it out and see what all of these gestures do, as it's really hard for me to show you. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of mobile setup. It's not really that different when you build your game. You just have to be aware of controls being slightly different, and obviously graphical settings are different as well. So hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next one.